life. Following God's plan for your life. And we started talking about this from Wednesday, and then we'll just do that throughout this month. And I want you to pay attention. Every man wants to ensure that their life counts. There's nobody that wants to come to this life and just eat, wake up, marry. Everybody has like a void that needs to be full, to be filled. Everybody wants to make an impact. Everybody wants to, it's just there. We set eternity in the hearts of men. There's just that yearning to say, I want my life to count. I want my life to count. And it's one thing for you to then know what the plan is. There is plan, there is purpose. You can't have a plan without having a purpose behind the plan. When they wanted to build this building, you can't just say, I want to build a building. Even if you go to somebody and you say you want to build a building, you want to construct a building, what would they ask you for? What would they ask you? Why? What's the purpose? What's the purpose of building this building? Is it a residential building? Is it a stadium? Is it an hotel? And even if it is an hotel, is it a 5-star? Right? They ask you that question. So purpose precedes plan. And we are talking about following God's plan for your life. We're not talking about following your own plan for your life. We're talking about following God's plan for your life. That means God has a plan for your life. God has a plan for your life. But if you can't follow a plan when you don't know the purpose, and every one of us here has the purpose of God for our life. God has a purpose for my life. God has a purpose for your life. It is when we then discover the purpose, even after discovering the why. Because purpose is the why. Why are you doing this? What's the purpose of something? There is still the how. Because the plan is the how. The plan is the strategy. The plan will include what resources needed. How long will it take to do this? The plan will include, don't do this yet. You will do this later. Because when you want to build this building, you can't do everything at once. That means some things must precede some things. That's planned for you. And in our life, when you go to burial, they will say this man lived between so time, between 1950 something to 2005. Do you understand what I mean? But within that space of time, everybody wants to ask themselves the question that, see, it's not just occupying or just existing throughout that time. It's about fulfilling that purpose and fulfilling it according to plan. You may know God's purpose, but how about following the plan alongside the purpose? You may know that you want to build a building, but there is a way to do it. And most people, if they want to build a big monument, they want to build something very big, they go to the best, because the best has the best plan to build that structure so that the structure will not crumble. We've seen things like that in Lagos State where, things were built through substandard products. It looked like they followed the plan, but the plan crumbled because they used substandard products. I'm sure you've seen things like that in Lagos, and Lagos State government is trying to ensure that people use very solid, good materials. So God has a purpose for our life. And that's why before I even try to go into anything called following God's plan for your life, it's also good to know God's purpose for our life. Once you jump to plan means that we presuppose that there is a purpose there. In Jeremiah chapter 1 and verse 5, this is the word of the Lord to Jeremiah. He says, before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. And before thou came forth from the womb, I sanctified thee, and I ordained thee a prophet unto the nation. God's plan precedes our birth. It's not because we look at something that we have or what we don't have, we then use that one to judge the plan of God for our life. No. The volume of the books of God for our life is there before you were born. Before you were born. You may be in Nigeria, but God's plan may be for you that you'll be in Finland doing something. And so your being in a particular state does not influence the plan of God, because there was already a plan before you were born. It's not going to be based on limitations. In fact, if you read Jeremiah chapter 1, Jeremiah was like, I can't talk. Because some people want to judge God's plan and purpose for their life based on what they think they have. Jeremiah is one person in the Bible that, how can you be a prophet? Oh, Dele Soro. Sorry, I'm using Yoruba. You know, when I wanted to really be hammered. God is calling you to do something and it looks like you don't have the capacity to. But he said before. Not that talent is bad, because I'll get to that. You got to use your talents and giftings. But you have to understand that it is not, you are not pointing to God's plan and purpose for your life based on something that happened after your birth. Before you were formed, God has a plan already. It's not because something happened. It's not because a pain happened. It's not because you now develop certain giftings and talents. It's because God already has a plan first before you were even born. He ordained him a prophet to the nations, and Jeremiah was like, I can't talk. What will I say? You know, we